Which neutral density filter should you buy first? If you want to know, just watch this video. So I get this question very often. And if you don't want to watch the entire video, I will tell you right away. The first filter to buy is the 10 stops ND, either in the square format or in the round screw-on format. Keep on watching and I will tell you why. The very first neutral density filter that I bought was a variable round screw-on ND filter. I think it was a 6 stops variable filter. It was the worst mistake. Bad quality. None of the stops was really working very well. Money just thrown in the garbage. Please don't do the same mistake. In order to explain to you why the 10 stops neutral density filter is the most versatile, I think I should take some photos and prove it to you. I also want to tell you that we are again in the Italian Alps. We have been in this spot before. I think it was winter 2020, full of snow. You might remember the video. Nevertheless, let me set it up. No better. At least they didn't die, but I still need to put it on. There is so much water that this looks good even without any ND filter, but I will make my point anyway. So I found my composition, ideal settings, the lowest native ISO possible. For my Nikon D810 is ISO 64, and ideally an aperture in the middle of the range of your lens. For my 20 millimeters will be f8. With these settings in aperture priority, my shutter speed is 1/8. Let's take a shot. The image looks good, but now we need to add neutral density filters. Let me grab my ND calculator app. 1/8 with a 10 stops would mean a 2 minutes and 8 seconds exposure. Let's do it. Over 30 seconds I will need my remote shutter release, of course, and I will use these 10 stops screw-on ND filter. Let me close the viewfinder. Let me go into manual mode. Let me set my shutter speed on the remote shutter release. I realized that by the time I did all these settings, the light went down a little bit because the sun is now hiding behind the clouds. So we'll keep my exposure a little longer than what the app suggested. 3 minutes and 30 seconds. You might have noticed that the Photo-T collection has a new entry, the Respect Nature shirt. I designed this t-shirt because I believe that us landscape photographers should be ambassadors for nature conservancy. So spread the word and buy the shirts. I appreciate your support. And finally, we got the first shot, 3 minutes and 30 seconds. This rough water became silky, but not necessarily we want to have such a long exposure. So how can we reduce the exposure length without changing filter? Let me show it to you. I removed my 10 stops And I will reassess the exposure now at ISO 64 1/6. But if I want to reduce the exposure, I will need a much faster base shutter speed. I can achieve this result by increasing my ISO. For instance, at ISO 400, I have 1/40. What this exposure will become with the 10 stops. And with the 10 stops and my final exposure will be 25 seconds. So we reduce quite a lot the exposure length. Let's see how this will look in real life. Same process, manual. I will not need the remote shutter release right now, and I started my exposure. You can see that at 25 seconds we still have the silky effect, but let's say that I want to reduce the exposure even more. What else can I do? And of course I can increase the ISO even more. I can compromise a little bit my ideal aperture and open the aperture ring a little bit. So let's see what is the fastest base shutter speed that we can get. So unfortunately the light is not cooperating because it's getting darker. The sun went behind the mountains now. Nevertheless, I'm stretching it. ISO 1600 and aperture 4.5. This will give me a base shutter speed of 1/200 that with the 10 stops and D will become just 5 seconds. That's right. So the final effect in this case, in this scene, didn't change very much, unfortunately, because there's too much white water. But I'm sure that you got the point. And I'm also sure that you realized by now that we can use the same method, but on the opposite side, closing the aperture in order to achieve longer exposures. I like to spend a few seconds to mention the pros and the cons of the square system versus the circular screw-on system. In my opinion, if you are just trying out, you are not thinking to invest in long exposure photography in the future, but you want to have the option to take some longer exposure photos here and there, possibly the single screw-on circular ND filter will be enough. Minimal gear, minimal weight, minimal investment, and you're good to go. If instead you are thinking that long exposure photography can be something that you want to build on, that you want to develop in the future, possibly the square filter systems will give you more option, as you can stack multiple filters at the same time. You can use graduated filters as well. You can also combine these systems with circular polarized filters. So this possibly is a much more complete solution for your long exposure photography. I also want to mention that there are some magnetic filters that are stackable. I will be testing some of these filters in the future, but the most important thing that I want to tell you is always invest in good quality gear. Remember that the quality of your images will be always limited by the quality of your worst piece of gear. So if you have a fantastic camera and you have a fantastic lens, but you put a really bad filters in front of it, the image quality will be bad. And this is all for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope that was useful for you. Enjoy nature, respect nature. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.